We are live and right back at you. It's part two of kind of like a doubleheader I've done today in episode 42. I'm going to get right into it, man. Obviously, I am Davidson Baker, the host of the Bottom Line podcast, and I'm joined today by a special guest of mine, a guy that I like talking to and that's very knowledgeable of the situation. A world-class boxing coach. He spent some time doing Kempo karate as well out in Vegas, as well as being the head coach on certain camps for Frank Mir, Brandon Vera, Anna Hulatan. We got my man Angelo Reyes back on the program today. My man, how you doing, bro?
Hey, no, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. I always like talking to young, passionate guys like yourself about this. And man, you're doing a double today. It was a big weekend of fights, and here we are again, right? Another huge weekend of fights. Vegas is definitely popping right now with this whole Canelo-GGG fight happening. So.
I bet, man. And I was going to ask you, being that we are kind of centralizing everything kind of all around Canelo and Triple G going into what is kind of on paper the biggest boxing fight of the year, maybe if you want to hold it to Wilder Fury and depending on how you look at it. What is the buzz overall like in Vegas right now? I'm sure it's absolutely beginning to become maddening. People waiting for this fight to start and for this beef to kind of be settled.
Yeah, no, usually, so May and September is always a big holiday, kind of this holiday weekend that for the boxing world, we're used to it. It's the Mexican holidays. A lot of people are traveling from out of town. And when you put a fight together like a Canelo Triple G, this is a fight that you remember last September is when they fought. And then they were supposed to fight in May. Didn't happen. A lot of controversy there. Golovkin himself ended up fighting. He knocked out Martirosyan, and Golovkin's got a really big Latin fan base. Actually, there's a lot of Mexican Americans and Mexicans that love to see Golovkin fight. He's an all-action type fighter. Really, in my opinion, right now, Golovkin is he's the best 160 pounder. I think he's just so exciting. You can pick apart whatever you want to say about how his style or how he comes forward. But he really does remind me a lot of, if I'm bringing up an old school name, Marvin Hagler. Marvin Hagler was the same way. He knows boxing. He knows how to box, and he knows how to really take your space. And that's what I love to see in Golovkin. And when Golovkin hits you, you've seen it. You saw what he did to people like David Lemieux and everyone else. Canelo is one of the few that survived it, right? So, right. It's very exciting. It's definitely crowded. Oh,
I'm sure, man. And I want to touch on something you said about Golovkin, and that is the fact that, kind of in this weight class, particularly when he hits guys, they kind of are completely taken away by the power that he possesses in his hands. And I think a lot of people really maybe not fail to, but kind of overlook to a team that Golovkin is really a fighter's fighter. When Canelo dropped out, or maybe not dropped out, but was suspended and the fight couldn't happen on Cinco de Mayo weekend, Triple G, he wanted to fight somebody. And no matter if it didn't have the glamour and the allure of a fight with Golovkin, especially how their first fight went, he stood in there and defended his belts against a guy that, maybe not a lot of people, Martirosyan, I believe.
Martirosyan, yeah.
Maybe not a guy that people were expecting to beat him, but a guy that had been battle tested before, and a guy that once again Triple G stood in there with, went toe to toe, and knocked out early.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And again, I think that's the lure for everybody who loves boxing. Boxing. It's one of these things where I always say, like, you either really, really, really love boxing, and then you're going to get into it, or if you're a lukewarm fan, then these are the fights that you'll kind of get into, but you're not going to know all the details on how amazing this division actually is. And when we talk about the 160-pound division, it is a stacked division. It is not one of those where you're like, oh, there's these two guys, and then there's no one else. Actually, we know that someone like a Billy Joe Saunders, who also has a belt in this division, would be a very compelling matchup for either guy. And I'm actually looking to see what happens after this fight. If will there be a trilogy? Will this just be an emphatic ending, and then we move on to something else? Are we going to see people like a Charlo fight a Golovkin or a Canelo? Are we going to see Billy Joe Saunders fight a Canelo, a Canelo or a Golovkin? So no, actually, whatever happens this Saturday will show us the rest of the landscape moving into the next year for 160 pounds. And this is why, by the way, this is why boxing is such in a healthy state. Is there's so many talented boxers, not just it's global. The talent for boxing is so global right now, and the divisions are very exciting. If we're talking about just how strong the talent is. We just saw Sergey Kovalev get knocked out, right? I mean, that just happened.
Right.
And a year ago, we were talking about, Sergey Kovalev. And now he's a footnote. It's like, he's done. We don't know what's going to happen next, right? Kind of the same thing, like on a card like this. We're talking about someone like Munguia. And Munguia just came out of in the boxing world, we know he had been being built up well. But, comes out of the gate, knocks out Saddam Ali to become to get the belt that Saddam Ali had gotten from Cotto. And then now we're going to see him on this undercard fighting a guy from Toronto who's trying to make a name for himself. So just a very, very healthy time for if you're a boxing fan.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that this division, too, is incredibly strong and much more to than what the eye can see. I think a fight that makes a lot of sense for either of these guys coming off the back end, maybe a Daniel Jacobs, Sergey Derevyanchenko winner. I think that fight has a lot of moving parts to it. That fight, I believe, is October 27th at Madison Square Garden. And then maybe the winner of Billy Joe Saunders, Demetrius Andrade makes sense. But the matchup that I particularly would really like to see is, like, say if Golovkin were to beat Canelo, and I think Canelo would serve well in this matchup too. A guy like Charlo is a guy that I think that's a matchup that is incredibly juicy and would make a whole lot of sense, especially for Golovkin, because that's a name that has been on the tip of Charlo's tongue for a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this is what's like I said, when you say a name like Daniel Jacobs, you have to remember that a lot of people believe that Daniel Jacobs really actually should have gotten the nod for a win against Golovkin. So out of everyone that's ever fought Golovkin, Daniel Jacobs I would say was the closest for you to be able to argue that he actually beat him. I mean, I was there for Canelo versus Triple G last year. And I didn't think Canelo won. I like Canelo. I'm just saying I didn't think he won. I think that if I was going to give the nod, even at a 7-5, 7 rounds to 5, I'd have given it to Golovkin. But the Daniel Jacobs one, I remember watching that, and I remember saying to myself, "Ooh, man, this is in the East Coast. I don't know. Daniel Jacobs might have pulled it off." So that's So there's another name, and then like you said, he's about to fight coming up. So depending on how well Daniel Jacobs does against, I'm going to butcher his name, Derevyanchenko. We'll see. But you're absolutely right. And then Charlo's just kind of like he's like the rookie of the. I don't want to say he's a rookie of the year, obviously, because he's already proven how good he is. But of all the names, he's sort of the rising star you kind of want to see, right? Is this like the LeBron James of this division? Is he gonna come out?
Comparing him to a guy like LeBron, wow.
Oh, we'll see. I like him though. I like him a lot. I think that a lot of people will have a very hard time with someone like Charlo, and the only way to really find out how good he'll be is if he gets a chance to fight the best people, the top names.
I think that there are some moving parts to a lot of things that Charlo could potentially be matched up against soon. And that you touched on it yourself and really said it to a T. This division is really, really good at the looks of it. Personally, I think, a matchup that also makes sense would be a Canelo versus Danny Jacobs fight. I mean, Danny Jacobs, just assuming that he does get the nod against Derevyanchenko, and that's not an assumption that I'm making, kind of candidly. I think that that's a tough fight. But maybe the dark horse in this division could also be a guy that fights against Billy Joe Saunders in late October, a guy in Demetrius Andrade. or Demetrius Andrade. I gotta keep in my head that
it's not Jessica Andrade, right?
it's
Demetrius
not just
Andrade.
Andrade.
Yeah.
I just got done talking a whole lot about Jessica Andrade and talking a whole lot about Jessica Andrade, and man, Demetrius Andrade though is not an easy opponent for Billy Joe Saunders. Both guys 25, both guys undefeated, but right around 25-0. I think Saunders 26-0. And
yeah, no, that'll be an interesting fight. And again, you know, when we watched Billy Joe Saunders pick apart Lemieux, you have to remember that at that time, a lot of people thought, oh, Lemieux, he's got that amazing left hook, he's got a lot of power, you know, he's got more experience, blah blah blah. And then Billy Joe Saunders just made him look silly. You know, it looked like how Canelo looked against Floyd Mayweather. You know, like it wasn't even really close. So that's what makes it so interesting when you know that there's a guy out there who's a world champion in Billy Joe Saunders, and what can a guy like that, what could he possibly do? You know, you saw what Daniel Jacobs did against Golovkin. You've seen even last year some of the rounds where Canelo showed some of the ways you could beat a Golovkin. What could Billy Joe Saunders do? You know, how you know, so it'll be interesting, because then if Andrade wins against Billy Joe Saunders, then you know, like now you start to go, whoa, you know, this division is it's crazy. It's really crazy. I wish they were all fighting under the same organization, but you know, there's a lot of hurdles when it comes to boxing, right?
Of course, man. And I think that's what makes boxing, to be honest with you, and this is a conversation to be had for another time potentially, but I think that's what kind of makes boxing a little more difficult to follow than like per se an MMA type of thing, because there's so many belts and there's so many organizations, and it's kind of difficult to keep everybody under, you know, one umbrella. But man, wouldn't it be awesome if you could? There could be so many amazing fights across all divisions that you could kind of make pretty easily. And on the topic of 154, and you know, we'll get to Jamie Munguia in a little bit more depth in a second, but you know, there are a lot of fights that you could make that would be so fantastic at 154 if that was the reality, like if Jarrett Hurd versus Munguia, or even Jarrett Hurd versus Jermell Charlo.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see how well Munguia does this Saturday, just because you know what he reminds me of, and again, just to be fair, he's really shown us how great he's looked in the last two fights. I think that beating Liam Smith, which was a former Canelo opponent, and the way that he did it makes you go, wow, you know, this kid Munguia is young, he's strong, he's got knockout power. But he kind of, you know, he reminds me of Fernando Vargas. Just a little bit, you know, just a little bit. He reminds me, I think that he does make some mistakes that he's going to need to fix. Lucky for him, he's not running into a high-level fight yet, like when Fernando Vargas ran into a Felix Trinidad, right? But at 154, Munguia is very exciting, and I think that the reason why they put him on this undercard against another banger in I think it's Brandon Cook, I believe it is, right, from Toronto, I think is to showcase, hey, look, is this kid going to be one of those guys that you guys all want to watch and see? Maybe we start to see like another Fernando Vargas, maybe. Or is he just like, hey, he did good the last two times this year, but he's not quite there yet? So that's it. You know, he's just like right there. I'm interested to see how well he does. I think obviously, you know, Munguia should be the favorite against someone like Brandon Cook. But as I've said before, man, anything can happen on fight night, right? This is big lights. This is certainly the biggest lights and the biggest stage that someone like Munguia has ever been a part of. Yep. So let's see how well he does, and he still is fairly young. So that's definitely a fight that everybody should pay attention to. You know, if you're only into watching the main event, you might want to tune into Munguia versus Cook, because I think that'll be a great fight.
Yeah, and Munguia is another guy that I, you know, kind of put in the category as fighter's fighter. I thought his fight with Liam Smith was awesome. I had a blast watching it. It was super exciting. And the thing that Jamie Munguia does exceptionally well, kind of like, man, all these Mexican fighters all have this just ingrained in their DNA, man. He rips to the body. And he absolutely goes for those shots to the body continuously. And the HBO commentary crew that was doing his fight against William Smith, and I have a love and hate relationship with how they call fights maybe sometimes, but I thought they were putting it kind of to its even. They said that they reminded it of maybe a younger Canelo. I didn't think I even heard a Vargas getting thrown in there as well. But back on the topic quickly of the main event before we kind of talk a little more about Jamie Munguia, I'm going to ask you on both sides. I think if I remember correctly, when we talked last about this fight, you said that there's a chance that you're going to go with Triple G finishing Canelo as your prediction. But before we make predictions, what does Triple G particularly have to do well in your eyes to solidify the win here and maybe even stop it?
Yeah, no, I don't think Triple G really has to do too many different things than even last year, what he was doing. And what you have to keep in mind again is that Triple G's been active. He didn't skip out on his May date. So that means that he went from fighting Canelo to back to a training camp to getting a fight and getting a knockout in May, and then right back to a training camp. And in the interviews that you watch Triple G talk about and some of the training footages that you see what Triple G is actually doing, he's very hungry. It's difficult when you're fighting someone the caliber of Triple G, who is that motivated to ever root against someone like him. So this is one of those times where I'm going to stick to, I do believe that if anyone was going to stop anybody, it would definitely be Triple G stopping Canelo. But yeah, no, I guess the easy thing is if you don't understand boxing and its roots, then you think, oh, well, Golovkin's easy to hit. But actually, there's hitting and scoring a point against him, and then there's hitting him and actually stopping him from hitting you. And there's not a lot of people that hits Golovkin and actually stops him. In a lot of ways, Golovkin likes that. He's like I said, he reminds me of like our version. Even though, even right now at 36 years old, Golovkin still reminds me of our version of Marvin Hagler right now, because Hagler was the same way. You remember back in the 80s, Hagler would talk about how he's like the Pac-Man, and he would just keep coming at you and chomping at you and chomping at you. And I feel like Golovkin's the same way. It's one of these things where you could maybe even look good against them for the first 3 rounds, but you always feel like there's this ticking time bomb that's about to happen because he's methodically just breaking you down. And his will is so high, his will is so strong that Golovkin not only breaks you down physically, but I think more importantly in a match, he breaks you down mentally. And if you give any type of if you show any type of weakness during that time, he's just going to capitalize on it. It's this thing about him. It's a gift. I think that it's not even, I know he trains hard, and I know he's got a great trainer in Abel Sanchez, and Abel Sanchez has got a very great coaching mind. But at the end of the day, Golovkin is just, he's got that gift. He's like a boxing savant. He just knows, like, you don't even worry about whether or not he gets hit. You just kind of go, at what point is Golovkin now going to shift and take over and win this match? So not much, as you know, Golovkin's got a good jab. When he hits you, his punch range, he understands his range. He understands how to close the gap. He doesn't really box outside, but it's one of these things where he does know how to box, and he knows how to box inside. He knows how to really make you miss and make you pay. And at times when you think you're hitting him, there are moments, you've seen it in a Golovkin fight, where he's purposely letting you hit him because he's actually trying to figure the timing out so he can meet you with the counter that he wants. So, like I said, I mean, it's not really a Golovkin adjustment. It's more, I'm more like thinking, what's the adjustment Canelo's made since the last time? Because I still feel like he got away with getting the draw, but it was a good fight. Like I mean, again, I was there. I'm not going to sit there and say Canelo didn't fight great, and I know that everybody, when we talk about a fight like this, everybody, Davidson, always talks about, well, that was just crazy. Adelaide Bird, 118, 110. How could you have done it? But I was one of the people that argued that, again, you're asking three judges on the fly based on their experience to give you their opinion. And for everybody who sits there and screams, well, that's just ridiculous. If you look at the actual scorecards, like I did that night when I was at the media room, 6 of the rounds that Adelaide Bird had was the exact same 6 that the other 2 judges had. So if you're going to get mad at her, you can only get mad at her for half the fight. And then when you watch those 6 that she, and again, I understand the overall scorecard came out looking like the way it did. But if half the fight she actually agreed to the other 2 judges, then you can only get mad at her for six rounds. And when you get mad at her for those 6, then that's when you start to do the whole, court of law. We're arguing it now, like where you can argue, well, it was kind of close. I mean, you're asking someone to do it in the fly. So I mean, I think that again, if there was in a lot of ways, would it be better if somebody just did what they used to do back in the old days, where instead of giving you a scorecard and then you would hear 118, 110, they just tell you the rounds that they picked. Would it be better like back in the 60s or in the 70s, where if a round is so close, you just give it a draw? You remember when the announcers used to say that 3 rounds even, like they used to. So maybe that's the way a fight like this, because this is definitely, to me, when you watch a match like this, if you're waiting for scorecards, you're gonna miss out on the boxing that you're going to see, the boxing display you're gonna see. I think as a fan, you just need to watch it, and you just need to enjoy the combat, and you just need to enjoy the chess game that they play against each other, and again, and really understand in your head, right? And I think a lot of times fans miss the point on this. How, if you were the one that was receiving that punch, would you have just kind of went, or would you have sat there and went, damn, that punch was really hard? And you have to remember that judges do score that way too, depending on the angle that they're sitting. If, let's say, you saw the 2 combatants and they were right next to you, and you saw maybe Golovkin throw a liver shot that maybe the other judge on the other side couldn't quite hear the impact or see the impact, but it was right in front of you, so you saw it. Even if on TV it looked like it would have been a Canelo round, if you're a judge and you're like, and you just saw it and you're saying to yourself, well, of all the punches I saw during this round, that one's the one that created the most damage, and then you scored for Golovkin, can you really get mad at that judge for feeling that way? So that's why I always say to everybody, when it goes to decision, man, it's subjective. It's based on opinion, and that's just how it always works,
Yeah, totally, man. I think that's a really good perspective. I didn't think a whole lot about, especially the 6 rounds, the 6 rounds kind of argument on the behalf of Adelaide Bird, who obviously, if anyone listening to this somehow is not aware, she was the one that scored the fight 8 rounds to 4 for Canelo. It's going to be definitely a topic of kind of a lot more. I'm trying to word this correctly. There's going to be a lot more eyes on potentially how this could go if it reaches the scorecards. But what do you think the percentage is, man, that this fight ends by stopping?
Honestly, I'm just looking at it from. You have to remember that this is, both fighters are now a year older, okay? And of the 2 fighters, the one that was active was Golovkin. Canelo is or maybe was, depending on how, I don't know what the truth is on how okay his right knee is. But remember, there was some cartilage issues going on with his right knee. And then He's been inactive. He had to obviously deal with did he take steroids? Did he not take steroids? Was it tainted meat? Was it not tainted meat? But all of that is a distraction. And when you think about all of that, you think that it's a year later, and you see that Golovkin hasn't lost his sharpness. I mean, he's still all there, even at 36. So if Canelo truly believes that he can go out there and implore a style against Triple G that could stop Triple G, then the chances of this going to distance is very slim to none. Really.
Wow.
It's just that I don't know if that's really the case. I kind of felt like even on the last fight, not to say that Canelo didn't have his moments of giving his all, but do you kind of notice that when he gave his all on their first fight, the most effect it gave Triple G, it wasn't like we saw Triple G all of a sudden have this shocked look on his face like, oh my gosh, I didn't think Canelo could hit that hard. Or, oh my gosh, it wasn't like that. And now that Triple G's been in there, there is no more, I wonder what it's like to be in there with Canelo. He's been in there with Canelo. He was in there with Canelo for the full distance. So I don't really see a fear factor in Triple G. I think that at this point, Golovkin is very motivated and he's very angry that their fight didn't even happen. I think that this is probably the most vocal in terms of saying things. Like Golovkin's really not like a shit talker. He doesn't really. It's not really his style. He just kind of is like he's like a gangster type fighter. He's just, I'm going to show up. We're going to fight. See how well you do. He doesn't really do it. But the fact that he said what he said about De La Hoya, and then Golovkin said what he said about Canelo, and he's saying that this is about respect, and so I think there's a lot of truth to when Golovkin is saying it, and with himself, and I think he really believes, like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put you away. So I don't think this goes the distance. Now, to argue that just for Canelo, just remember again that Canelo does tend to do his best as a counter fighter when you over exceed. You overdo your punches, you overthrow, or you. So a mistake, let's not forget, it's not like Canelo can't hurt you. So if Golovkin makes a mistake, we saw it in the Daniel Jacobs fight too. If Golovkin makes a mistake, can Canelo capitalize on it? But no, I don't think it's going to go the distance. I think I'll say there's a 75% chance that this ends in stoppage, and there's a 25% chance that this ends up going the distance. I think the only way it really goes the distance is if Canelo spends a lot of time boxing from the outside and being slick and trying to use more of a counter punching, get out of the way shit, type of style. He's gonna basically have to. This is like Leonard Hagler in a way, right? Like he's gonna have to Sugar Ray Leonard his way into a 12-round decision. But if it's as they promise, if Canelo's really gonna say, I am going to knock you out, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna show everybody, whatever, all the things he's been saying in the media leading up to this point. If he really does that, then we're gonna see somebody stop somebody.
Yeah, I think so too, man. I don't think that this one's going to go to the scorecards for a lot of really good reasons to believe that this fight has kind of turned into a grudge match per se, when there wasn't really that type of element in the first one. Granted, no matter what, I'm very excited. And moving on kind of to, I believe this is the co-main event. It should be. It is Jamie Munguia and Brandon Cook. What do you think the chances are Brandon Cook shocks the world? I'm going to take a look really quickly at the odds. I know he was a massive favorite last time I checked. Jamie Munguia was.
Yeah, he should be, by the way, a massive favorite because of the last two opponents he's beaten. I mean, I mean, again, this is what you have to do, right? Prior to a fight, you have to look at, well, who did they fight prior to fighting each other? And based on Munguia's not only performance, but who he actually fought. And by the way, back to back, man. I mean, he scores a knockout in May and fights Liam Smith in July. And, he's got the hot, he's like the hot shooter right now, right? He's hitting the threes, so to say. So I would say Munguia should be the heavy favorite. But again, this is boxing. It wasn't that long ago that a year ago, did you know who Munguia was? Did you even know that name? Did you even understand, right? And he had to have that coming out party against Saddam Ali. So for Brandon Cook, here's a Canadian coming from Toronto. He's got a decent amount of knockouts himself, right? And sure, his opponents maybe aren't in the caliber, but bright lights, big stage. This is the chance for Brandon Cook to maybe show. So that's why I mean, for me, it's funny when you're looking at a card like this. This is what I'm talking about. Like, if you're going to pay the pay-per-view anyways, then don't be a dummy and not watch this fight. Like, watch this fight, because then you might be surprised at how exciting a fight like this ends up being. A guy who wants to showcase how good he really is versus a guy who's still trying to prove how good he really is. And both have a very fan-friendly style. So definitely exciting. I'm picking Munguia for knockout, obviously, but I think it'll be exciting. I think it'll be an exciting fight to watch.
Me too, man. I think you kind of took all the words out of my mouth. I think that's exactly how it should be. I also believe that if you are going to buy the pay-per-view, don't make the mistake and not watch Munguia Cook. And another fight that I think people would be making a mistake if they don't watch is a middleweight contest between one David Lemieux and Gary O'Sullivan. Gary O'Sullivan is a potentially unknown up-and-coming middleweight that I believe is, and if I'm not mistaken, is signed to Golden Boy. He's got, an entire country of Ireland right behind him, as they do so with the rest of their fighters, and he's taking on a former world title challenger and a guy that has fought Triple G and Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, no, that's what. And again, this is one of those where they're giving it to you anyways, right? I think, is that one the co-main event? I think they purposely made that one the co-main event. I believe that
is true.
Yeah. So, with Sullivan, I think everybody, it's one of these things where will Lemieux be able to kind of get that the ghost of that Billy Joe Saunders loss off his back, right? And that makes Lemieux now a really great opponent for someone like Sullivan, who's trying to get in the mix, so to say, right? Yeah. So this is one of those things where winner or loser of this one could very well be maybe an opponent that you see as an opponent to rebuild whoever loses the Canelo Triple G match. I mean, you have to look at it. I think that's the reason why maybe this is the co-main event, is in terms of excitement of rising star potential. Let's say we could agree that the Munguia fight against Brandon Cook is probably the one to watch for the rising star part. This is more for I think it's the co-main event for the reason that, let's say it ends up ending in a stoppage, Golovkin wins, Canelo loses. Well, you need Canelo. You need to prove to everybody that Canelo's still a factor, right? And if Canelo still wants to fight, then it would probably make sense to maybe put Canelo against a David Lemieux or maybe Sullivan, right? So I think that's probably the reason why they have it as the co-main event. But definitely, again, it'll be worth watching. It'll be a good warm-up to seeing what we're going to see in Canelo Triple G.
Yeah, man, I definitely think so. The last fight, I believe, that is on like a part of the pay-per-view, because there is an undercard, and we did kind of touch on it before we went live, is there are 7 complete fights on pay-per-view. It says 8, but then there's one at the bottom with a guy versus a TBA. But the last fight that looks to be included in the pay-per-view is former, man, it's 115 pounds if I'm not mistaken, super flyweight, Chocolito Gonzalez.
Yeah,
Like,
he was the former pound for pound, right? I mean, he was.
yeah.
I mean, amazing until he ran in twice into that killer Thai fighter.
Thai, man.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for saying it.
It's hard to say his name.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, he's always exciting to watch. Again, we don't know how much he has left. I believe he's fighting. Is it Moises Fuente? Right, is who he's fighting.
Right.
And again, that's a good fight to watch, guys. I mean, if you're again a boxing fan and you just want to see good boxing, then if you're gonna buy the pay-per-view, don't miss the first fight. Like, watch that fight. You know, this is a former pound for pound that you're gonna get a chance to see, and he's the opener for your paper. I mean, you know, for this pay-per-view match. So definitely again, and I would say, again, for anyone who's listening to this now, when you guys watch a boxing match, just remember that it isn't two people that don't know what they're doing, just throwing punches out there. These are all of these fighters that you're going to see on that pay-per-view card are all people that have worked on their craft for a very long time, for a lot of years. They're going to be playing chess against each other, and it's really going to show us who still got it, who still doesn't, what kind of grade we're going to give everyone. So just enjoy it. Enjoy the boxing match for what it is. I think you know, just let you know, this isn't KSI versus Logan Paul. Okay, these aren't like these.
What
these
you think about that, bro? I gotta know what you thought about it. I watched it because my brother is like a YouTube like kind of guy that loves these things, and I've known Logan Paul is like from a couple hours away from where I live.
Oh, okay.
It was a spectacle. It wasn't a boxing showcase, and it never was going to be that. But did you watch it? Did you not want to waste your time? You know, I would imagine a guy like yourself wouldn't really want to subject yourself to such amateurish level of boxing.
So I'll tell you how I even found out about it, because I didn't even know what the hell was going on or who these guys were. So my son, you know, I on Instagram, and in my storylines, I talk about him a lot. He's the one with congenital heart defect. He's 14 years old now, and he's going into high school. So over the summer, I spent a lot of time with my son, and Joseph tells me, he's like, "Dad, I want you to go watch this KSI versus Logan Paul," and then just to see kind of the excitement in his eyes, right? That's probably what drew me more to it. Like, I could care less, like you said, in terms of two guys who aren't boxers. They're not in this athletic field, and anybody who is an average amateur would beat either guy, right? Like, I didn't care. I didn't know about it. I didn't care about it. But when my son started talking about it, and Joseph started telling me, you know, just how the event was and how much he got into it, what I got out of it more is, this is a 14-year-old kid who's really excited about seeing something like this. And I wish I could see more 14-year-old kids with that type of excitement over regular boxing. Like, I would like to see the same. I'd like to see a 14-year-old kid, you know, I'd like to see my son talk to me the way he was talking to me about Logan Paul and KSI, talk to me about Canelo Triple G. You know what I mean? I would love to see that. I would love to see that passion from a 14, because I was one of those kids. Like, I was that kid that was into, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler and Oscar De La Hoya and Trinidad, and you know, I really got into it. But, you know, we're in this generation now where, what was the crazy numbers? Was it like 8 million pay-per-view, viewers or something insane, right?
It was, I think, upwards of 1 million, but it was only on YouTube, and it was $10 a pop.
Right. But still, that's insane. Like literally, man, it's like you right now could go start training for 5 months, go fight one of those guys, and you'd probably do okay. You know what I mean? Like it's not even, they're not from a fighting background. Either guy is a fighter. I mean, the most recent thing that I just heard this week now, which I thought was kind of funny, is there's some beef between Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. So I'm just wondering, like, is this kind of the trend right now? Like with all of these young YouTubers that are seeing it, is everybody going to want to fight everyone? Are we going to, are we actually going to see 50 Cent out there in an MMA match?
Oh my
like, what is going on in the world? But yeah, but I will say this: I did not watch the fight. What I did see is my son. He sent me the highlights. So obviously, because I love my son, and he's passionate about this, I went ahead and watched the highlights. And not to be mean about it. So when I saw the highlights, what I can say is I give respect to both guys in the sense that they took it seriously enough that they really worked hard to put on the best show that they could put on. And you can never, at the end of the day, man, you can't get mad at anyone who really puts the work behind having to go in the ring. And I think both of those guys really did put in solid work before they went out and fought each other to go in the ring. So, you can't, until, for all the people who always just sit there and they say negative things all the time, or they want to sit there and criticize. It's like, okay, bro, get up, get on a treadmill, start running, whatever, 2 miles, 3 miles, go ahead and do some shadow boxing, hit the bag a few times, get some good training in. And then after you do all of that, get in a ring and spar somewhere. And if you still feel the same way you feel after you put in all that work and get in there and do it yourself, then I guess you'll have a valid opinion. Until then, you kind of are just a hater, man. Like, stop hating on these guys. Like, yes, they're not Canelo and Triple G, and I get that, but I am seeing I am seeing someone like my son who is so excited over a Logan Paul and a KSI that it makes you like go, wow. So how many more 10 to 14-year-olds or 10 to 17-year-olds are that excited about something like this? And maybe there's even something we can do to borrow from it, in the boxing world. Maybe we could figure out, how do we get these 14-year-olds as excited about Canelo Triple G that they are about Logan Paul KSI? So, just to put a positive spin on it, because it's the easy thing to do is to put the negative spin on it, right?
Yeah, no, totally, man. And I do like that perspective from looking at it as well. And, I think it makes a lot of sense. And there are ways to go about, handling any type of views or opinions on a lot of things and turning the positive aspect on everything. My man, I think that just about does it for us too. You want to let listeners know, as you previously mentioned, you do post a lot of stuff with your son, who you call the most courageous fighter you've ever met in your life, and I enjoy, giving likes to those posts as well. You want to let people know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, no. If you guys want to follow me, I'm at on Instagram. I'm at Reyes Boxing, and on Twitter, I'm at Reyes Striking. And I post a lot about, again, congenital heart defect is something that we're dealing with. 1 in 100 kids get affected by this. It's actually the biggest the biggest killer out there right now. When you combine all the cancers together, there's more kids that get affected by congenital heart defect, and I just think that a lot of people don't know about it. So if you can, just take a little bit of time to even look up what CHD is, have some CHD awareness, and then like I've always told you, Davidson, I like to talk to people who are positive. I hate negative energy, man. It's just there's no point to it. There's no point to any negative energy at all. So and have fun this weekend, guys.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna have a blast watching the fights. I'm also gonna, reach out to you maybe a couple times throughout and get your take on what's happening. And are you gonna be there?
I'm like this, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I might be. We'll see.
For sure, man. Thanks again for coming on. I appreciate you always, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, my man.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Have a good one.